Well, why don't we get started? I think other people will trickle in. I was explaining to Shamari Oliver that I used a different sort of invite system through LinkedIn this time. So I'll have to see if everything went through the right way. But in any case, thanks for joining for the Career Sponsor Playbook. So we're going to talk today not just about what a sponsor is, but how to actually get one for your career, whether you have one already, whether you don't have one, or whether you're trying to get an additional sponsor. We're actually going to get down to the nitty-gritty of how to actually do it and not just give definitions of what a sponsor is, which I think most people have started to learn about already. So for all of us, our career is a bit of a journey, and parts of that journey can be faster and parts of that journey can be slower. And for some people, it can be very fast, or parts of the journey can suddenly accelerate. And all of a sudden you find yourself doing things that you never would have imagined doing before. And other times you'll see other people who are moving very fast and you're like, wow, how are they moving so fast? And sometimes it feels a little bit like this. So I just want to share a quick clip from, a kind of a nice car brand. So let me ask Shamari, do you know anyone like this, or has this ever happened to anyone where all of a sudden your career is rapidly accelerating?
Yeah, I definitely have witnessed that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about you, Oliver? Have you seen that or experienced that at some point? Oh, Oliver dropped off. Well, in any case, we'll keep going. In addition, although sometimes it can be like that, at other times, your career can be very frustrating and it can feel a little bit more like this. So you start to ask yourself, what's the difference, right? You had one Ferrari that's flying down the hills of Italy, taking these hairpin corners so well. And then you have the other Ferrari that can barely go 2 or 3 feet in the snow and is obviously having problems. It's the same car, right? Probably has the same tires, but in one situation, they're accelerating and speeding through, and in others, it's not. So we're going to talk about how a sponsor can make a difference in the traction in your career, in your performance. So how are we going to do that? First of all, just want to share this session is being recorded. I'll share a copy with everyone in a follow-up email afterwards. Secondly, and I always get this direction wrong. I'm very curious, so I'll be asking you questions as we go along, and please unmute, or if you're not able to talk, just pause and I'll move on to the next person. Nice to see you, David. And what is our agenda? We're going to go over something I like to call the sponsorship paradox. Then we're going to go over the principles of how to get chosen. And then we're going to put at least one person, if we have time, 2 people in the driver's seat, where we're actually going to work on strategizing a way to get an actual sponsor that maybe you have in mind. So this is meant to be a very practical session and helpful, not just theory. All right, so what is the sponsorship paradox? Well, to sum it up kind of simply, it's the fear that although you want to be noticed and you want to be sponsored, you don't want to be seen as that person. So what happens, David, do you think, when you're that person, right? When you're like, me, look at me, look at me, look at me. How do people tend to react to that, David?
Uh, it from that's a very funny video too. Um, from that video, it almost makes that person seem to be the center of attention, um, and no one else is getting that opportunity because that person is like taking control or taking over.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do people react to that, right? Like how might others react if, like, let's say you're that person? How do they respond to you?
If I'm that person saying me,
Yeah, exactly.
if it, it would almost be that person would that person or that group would react to me, um, maybe in a not maybe in a not favorable way. I guess it would be. I guess it would depend on the personality of the people that are seeing me do that. Maybe some in a not favorable way, or maybe some thinking that I was real aggressive.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it just kind of depends on the person or the group that's watching me. Obviously, I'm the one that's bringing the most attention to myself by doing that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get some strange looks about that, I would imagine.
Yeah. So, what David's identified is there can definitely be some drawbacks to drawing, a lot of attention to yourself, or always being, me. Obviously, that's exaggeration. But then the challenge becomes, if you're not drawing attention to yourself, right? If your head is just down and you're doing good work, and you're just relying 100% on other people to sing your praises, how do you guarantee you get seen? Right now, you're just kind of relying on the kindness of others. And maybe the people who should speak out for you aren't that kind, or for whatever reason don't want you to excel. And then now you're kind of stuck with a challenge, right? So how do I promote myself without seeming too overtly self-promotional? So that's a pretty big challenge, which leads me to our second challenge. And this is kind of the main part of our discussion today, which is why you, right? Like, why should you get chosen over someone else? Right? There's a lot of other people who are working hard. They're sacrificing. They're doing good work. Maybe they have a sparkling personality just like you, right? Why should someone who has limited time um, choose you over someone else to invest in as a sponsor? So if we don't understand that why, it becomes very difficult to get to the how and to figure out how to get chosen, because we don't understand why anyone would choose me over someone else, or why I might not get chosen because someone else is getting chosen. So that's really the starting point for the career sponsor playbook, which is understanding why you, and how do you, or how do others get chosen. So we're going to learn a little bit, take a lesson from Hamish Abernathy of the Hunger Games. So I think most people will be familiar with the book or the movie. And he actually has some strangely sage advice for our corporate discussion about what it takes to get a sponsor. So let's see what Hamish has to say about sponsorship.
You really want to know how to stay alive? You get people to like you. Oh, not what you were expecting. You're in the middle of the games and you're starving or freezing. Some water, a knife, or even some matches can mean the difference between life and death. And those things only come from sponsors. And to get sponsors, you have to make people like you. And right now, sweetheart, you're not off to a real good start.
So we can see that being liked is a key to being sponsored. So let me ask Shamari, when you watch that video, how does that land with you in terms of what you've seen in terms of people who get sponsored, or maybe who are trying to get sponsored and don't quite get the sponsorship they want or need?
I think in terms of the people I've seen get sponsored, it's sort of been the key, right? Is that they've been liked by the sponsor, and that's what gets them in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk about what Shamari has sort of confirmed, which is sort of that this liking principle as being so important. And there's actually two ways to get to sponsorship, and two reasons why people are typically liked, and want to sort of share the differences and how we can leverage one or the other, or both, right? But the key here is there are two doors, when often sometimes we feel like there's just one. It helps to know that there's actually an additional path. So the first door to being liked is when the externals, the outside, is the same. So what do I mean by the outside, right? It could be something as trivial as the car I drive or the way I dress. It could be a hairstyle. It could be my race or ethnicity. It could be my accent, the way I talk, right? If I'm from Boston and you're from Texas, right, or California, that outside's going to feel very different. And you don't have to go very far to read some sort of psychology or sociology study to say we like people who are like us. That's built in to our DNA, and it's sort of, we've been socialized that way, that when those external things are the same, we're going to like that. I don't want to say automatically, but there's more of a tendency for that liking to happen. So why do you, I'm going to ask David, why do you think that is? Like, why do you think we naturally kind of like people who are easily identifiable on the outside as like us?
Sorry, I had a maniac dog barking at my door.
No worries.
Well, I think that starts a conversation, because when you're outside sane, then you have some small detail that somebody can relate to, and it starts the conversation. So, if I'm driving, and I can give you an example. I was at the grocery store and I had just got a new car, and I saw this lady parked next to me with the same car, different model.
Yeah.
And so I said, "How do you like driving that car?" And she said, "Oh, I love it. Here, come and sit in it. Sit in it." And I was like, "No, I don't want to sit in it. I just want to know how you like the car." She was like, "Oh, I love it." And then she went into this whole story about how she got the car and how she thought she wasn't going to get it, but the salesperson was a friend of another friend, and talked her into getting it, and she was like, "Are you sure you don't want to sit in it?" I was like, "No, I was just curious because it was the next model car up from the one that I had. So I
Mhm.
had an interest in wanting to know about that car and how she liked it in case when I buy my next car, I might go to that model." So I think it starts with what you can relate to, the outside same. It doesn't, you don't necessarily have to know that person. Obviously, I didn't know that woman from anywhere, but we had a connection and we related to something. So I think that's how that starts, or how that sponsorship can start.
David, I love that story. She invited you to sit in her car. I mean, that's how powerful that likeness was for her in this instance. I
Mhm.
mean, incredible, right? I mean, you couldn't have planned it.
Right, right.
So, and here's the thing, right? Here's the difficulty with outside same. Is David or Shamari or Joe or anyone else going to go around buying the car of the person we want to sponsor us? I mean, is that practical? Right? So the challenge with outside same is it's largely a factor of luck, coincidence, serendipity, right? Maybe I have one boss, he drives a Ferrari and I'm out of luck because I'm not getting a Ferrari anytime soon. But then my next boss comes, and I've had this happen. My boss drives a Subaru. We're a Subaru family. Well, all of a sudden, hey, Joe's my kind of guy. He's a Subaru guy, right? So the challenge with the outside same, and it's not necessarily just a monetary thing. It's like it's often kind of like out of your control, and it's not something you're shifting kind of often. And one area, and I'm passionate about talking about these issues, is when it comes to diversity and what your upper management or potential sponsors may look like, identify like, if that's different than you on the outside, right? So if I look around at my work and there are no devilishly handsome Asian men running the organization, well, I'm out of luck, right? Or if I look at the organization and all the top leadership, is not straight, then maybe I'm out of luck, right? Like that's not something I'm gonna change or pretend about, or could even change in terms of that liking factor. So, and that's a real challenge for people if you look around and management in America looks a certain way still and will for many years. It puts you, it gives you an extra challenge, right? Because if you did look more like them, it'd be a lot easier for you to be liked, not because you're more likable, but just because of this factor that we all naturally like folks who are the same. And if you don't look like upper management, you're out of luck. You don't get to go through door one, right? But luckily, there is door two, because if there was just door one, then that would be pretty difficult for most people. And door two, I like to call inside same, right? Sometimes, and this can often be more powerful than outside same, right? And let me share a story with you of someone I interviewed recently, Ana Escobedo Cabral, who was former US Treasurer. She was the highest ranking Latina in the Bush administration. And she's very democratic, very progressive, from that sort of ideology. And her sponsor, one of her lifelong sponsors, and one of the first government jobs she had, was with a very conservative Senator Orrin Hatch. So she's a young, aspiring staffer, and she gets an interview with Orrin Hatch, who's on the total opposite end of the ideological spectrum, as she would admit. And she tells the story, and she's thinking, well, I don't know this. I don't even know why he gave me this interview. Like, how would I actually, be able to work with this person when we come from such different, sort of worlds? And so the thing that she said, which was really eye-opening to me, the thing that was the same for them, that they could both bond over, was they both grew up very poor, right? So this powerful senator, right, grew up poor, and this very young, starting out Latina, aspiring, aide, also started out and grew up poor. And that was a very powerful point of connection for them that was able to be sort of like that kernel, perhaps, in that starting point for the sponsorship, which she experienced from Orrin Hatch for many years, throughout the rest of her career. So it's to point out that, just because the obvious things are not there, there are other things on the inside that will make that liking happen, that make the sponsorship more able. And oftentimes that can be even more powerful. Now, let me ask Shomari, what is the sort of challenge or extra hurdle of that inside same versus the outside same?
I mean, I think for the people sharing that information, it involves being vulnerable.
Yeah. And what's the challenge there of relying on that or getting that vulnerability?
Yeah, I mean, I think, sort of first thing is even getting into that space, right? And viewing that as something that can be leveraged to open the door to sponsorship.
Yeah.
Because if you're never comfortable sharing, you're never going to get to door two.
Yeah. And it's harder to see what's inside, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So to Shamari's point, it requires a certain amount of transparency, disclosure, vulnerability. So to recap, there are two doors to sponsorship, right? And the principle or the lever, however you pronounce it, is to be liked by the sponsor, because they don't have to sponsor you. They don't have to sponsor anyone, right? Their career is going to be just fine without expending any additional political capital to sponsor you, generally because they've already made it, right? That's why you're looking to them to sponsor you. So there's two paths, and it's not that one is better than the other. It's just they're different, right? There's the outside same, which is a very natural thing that we do. And equally, the inside same is also something that we naturally do, right? When we see that someone shares a value, a history, something that's not apparent just by looking at them or looking at objects, that can also be a very powerful way for that liking to work. All right. So we're going to move on to the driver's seat. So I promised earlier that we were going to have an opportunity to game plan and get someone some practical advice for sponsorship. So let's see. Let's go with Shomari, if you're willing to volunteer.
Sure.
Would love for you to. You don't have to name the person's name, but maybe come up with a fake name. Who is like a person that that you would love to be a sponsor to you?
Oh, I'd have to think about that one for a minute.
You could also think of like a category or a type of person. It doesn't have to be like the specific, individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be somebody who's been really successful at starting and running their own business.
Okay.
And who's made a lot of money in doing that.
Okay. So an entrepreneurial type sponsor. Okay, great. And how is their sponsorship going to help you specifically? Like what are you envisioning in terms of the sponsorship, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think just sort of the value of understanding how to successfully dive into new territory,
Mhm.
right? And how to do that as a you know entrepreneur, as a founder, um, and whether they've had sponsors who helped them along or whether they did it alone.
Yeah. And along those lines, what can they actually do for you in addition to like the advice and perspective? Like what might they actually do above and beyond that to use some of their political or business capital to push you along further than you might be able to do without them?
Yeah, I think maybe make introductions to their network.
Yeah. Yeah. What else?
Um, I think just sort of provide general advice.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, Shomari, you're in luck because David and I are going to work with you on figuring out how to get this sponsor more on your side because we will be your pit crew. Oops. Yep. So David and I don't get to just sit back and rest. So we're going to work with you, Shomari, to figure out what this type of person, how we can get you a little bit closer to having their sponsorship. So David, let's brainstorm with Shomari a little bit. From if we start with the first door, the outside same perspective, what might that look like for Shomari? And have you seen Shomari? Has Shomari's camera been on so you can at least see what he looks like?
No.
Give me 1 second.
There he is, my man Shomari. I used to work with Shomari, so very fond of him.
All right. How you doing, Shamari?
Hey.
And Shomari, David and I, we've done some collaborations together, so we're all friends here. So David, from a outside same perspective, right? Like you see Shomari on the screen. What might that mean in terms of the types of sponsors who may gravitate towards Shomari?
Maybe his personality.
Yeah.
Maybe his the way he has communicated what he is looking for. Just being upfront and honest about what it is that he's wanting from a sponsor.
How about when he walks into a room? Shomari hasn't opened his mouth, right? What might someone gravitate towards Shomari? Right?
Yeah. We both have this. We both have the same. I
All of
call it.
us.
I call.
Three of us do.
I call it because of children that I have no hair. So that could start a conversation right there and
Mhm.
kind of start the ball rolling and starting that relationship. I was going to say earlier too that a lot of times part of the sponsorship process, I think, is you can't just say, I need a sponsor, but
Exactly.
you gotta build a foundation. And I think that's when you build that relationship and get to know that person and they can kind of see some of the things about you. And Shamari, as you had said earlier about being transparent and being a little bit vulnerable, that kind of lets that person's inside to kind of see a little bit about you and about your character too. And then they can kind of like piece that together to say, yeah, this is somebody that I would want to sponsor.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I'm brainstorming totally random stuff like, you know, glasses, right? If you wear glasses and that other person wears glasses, maybe you have a similar style glasses, right? That could be a discussion right there. Oh, I love your specs, right?
Yeah.
I've actually said to people, I like your hairstyle, right? Who also have shaved heads, and you immediately kind of have that bond because, hey, either we both want to shave our heads or we both lost our hair. So, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, you're going to like me more than some guy who has beautiful flowing locks. And, you know, I mean, that person is not going to immediately be liked based on their hair. Like if the guy that, you know, you're looking, or the woman that you're looking to sponsor you, you know, has a more bald kind of, you know, hairstyle. Other things could be height, weight, clothing, right? Everyone has a certain style. So imagine you have you're part of the hoodie crew, right? Like you're like that whole Silicon Valley chic, right? That person who dresses that way is going to respond more to someone else who talks them up in a hoodie than to someone in a three-piece suit with French cuffs and a beautiful handkerchief, right? It's the outside is sending some sort of signals, and you know, the word I like to use is it's a heuristic, right? It's a shortcut, right? It's a shortcut to say, oh, you have that, I have that, there must be something similar between the two of us, because otherwise, right, David, why would we be driving the same car? Because we're both people of exquisite taste in automobiles, right? So Shamari, would love to get your sort of reaction and perspective based on this. When you kind of think of potential sponsors, how does this sort of land with you in terms of strategy and things you might want to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. I think like other things that I would think about are, you know, people who have been. I'm from New York originally, so like people who have been locally successful, right? You know, people who are sort of born and raised New Yorkers. You know, we can share sort of that bond around sort of background and upbringing, because that's sort of what I would want to get out of the sponsorship, right? Like I would want to understand, you know, how they leverage that to achieve their success. So you know, something like that could also you know, be around career. But I think one of the things that I look for in sponsorship is somebody who's had a different career experience to mine.
Interesting. I love that you brought up geography, right? That's so powerful, right? You remember there was a time, even like with phone numbers, like people wanted like certain area codes because that like somehow signified something that like, you know, that you're part of a club. So even something as an area code can be used as sort of an external sort of signifier for what people like. So, you know, all this to point out that, you know, door one is not good or bad. It just is. And to the extent that there are things that are externally similar or easily identifiable, that's going to play in our favor, right? And Shamari, I love what you brought up. It's a bit of a two-way street, right? So it's not just that I show up wherever and I hope other people are like me, right? I can actually use that as a filtering or a screening mechanism to say, okay, who are the types of people that I will resonate with, that I will like, because they have similar externalities to me. And then, you know, the upshot is that they will also have that same feeling towards you. All right. Well, let's think about door number 2, right? Door number 2 is the inside space. So Shamari, I'm going to ask you to kick this part off because I know you a little bit. David just met you. What are things maybe that won't be apparent to people on the outside, but that once they get to know you are the things that tend to resonate or things that you become known for, that could, sort of resonate with future sponsors?
Yeah, I think probably like number one on my list there would be things about sort of your family or your background or your culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe number 2 on that list would be like sort of extracurriculars, your hobbies, things that you like to do that you're passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe share 1 or 2 of those with us, like one or 2 details about family or hobbies or cultural background that might come up in conversation.
I mean, I think sort of to the theme of this talk, I like cars. So
Nice.
if I find somebody who's who's sort of part of that group, or even somebody who sort of into to things that are like mechanical, right? Whether or not it's really a car, whether it's motorcycles or boats or or if they're a pilot, something along those lines. I'd find that a sort of good way to bond.
I love that. So now David and I are jumping in as the pit crew. David, how might Shamari leverage this, unique detail about himself, that he already has inside when it comes to getting sponsors, meeting sponsors, developing relationships with people who may become his sponsors, this whole automotive mechanical aspect?
I think when he talks about it, I could kind of see when you started talking about cars and mechanical, your face kind of lit up a little bit. So that kind of triggers me to let me know that that's something that you like. And if I'm a sponsor, then I'm thinking, because one day I would like to restore a 66 Mustang. And so that's a mechanical aspect that you share that we could probably talk about. And from that, just from talking about cars, from that, I get to know a little bit about the personal side of you and what your passions are about cars as it relates to something that I don't even have a mechanical knowledge about, but I know that it's a passion that I would like to be able to restore that type of car. So from there, that's where the relationship starts. That's where the relationship starts to build, just from talking about the cars. Even though you have the mechanical capability, I have the 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 the, the the fantasy part of it, of owning that car as a retirement car, and then from there we can build on that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that insight, David. And one thing I was thinking of in addition to the great point that David just brought up was, where are the people who have that inside same as you, Shamari? Like, where do they congregate, right? Like,
Cars and coffee.
yeah. So where do you find large numbers of people who are automatically built into like you? And even better, if they also have some connection to the business, the job, right? Whatever the thing that is you're getting sponsored. If you can find those 2 together, you're off to the races, man. Right?
And I said, let me turn around. Let me go here and turn around in this parking lot. And when I went into the parking lot, what did I see? I saw a 66 Mustang.
Wow.
And so I was like, I got to stop and ask this guy about this car. And so I stopped and I asked him. He talked to me for an hour. He didn't even know me, but he talked to me for an hour.
Wow.
About this car, about how he restored it. So much so that he told me about places. I live in Columbus, Ohio. He told me about places to go in Columbus, Ohio, if I was interested in having a car restored. He told me about they'll go and find a car for you. They'll bring it back to you in Columbus. They'll ship. I mean, he gave me all this information about this car only because I stopped and I said, man, I like your car. And that triggered him to just tell me everything about this car. So in a sense, that was almost low-level sponsorship in a sense that
Yeah.
he told me places where I could go to help me fulfill my dream of having a car, a 66 Mustang restored. So, and I didn't even know this person. And he talked to me for an hour.
David, you have the best sponsorship stories.
It's crazy. It all, you know, that's kind of like the inside out and the outside in. That's kind of like both of them kind of combined in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Shamari, before we get to the sort of question period, what's one or two things you might do going forward to try to like activate this sponsorship? Maybe you're doing it already, but just curious if this has sparked any sort of ideas for you from a practical perspective.
Well, I mean, I think to the point of what David just said, you have to get out there, right? So, you know, obtaining a sponsor is always going to take some level of effort on your part, but I think sort of the point of the exercise is that it's worth making that effort.
Yeah. And I love the examples because you never know which one is just going to like resonate, right? But to your point, Shamari, you're out, you're interacting, you're mentioning things, you're being seen. So whether it's inside or outside, it's that contact, it's that connection, which creates the opportunity for liking and the opportunity for sponsorship. All right. Awesome. Well, Shamar, I hope that was helpful. And David, thank you for being a dedicated member of the pit crew. All right. Any questions with regards to what we've talked about today, or sponsorship, or maybe other issues we've talked about in previous calls if you've been on?
I mean, what do you think are sort of the best vehicles for finding sponsors, right, and for connecting with people?
So when you say vehicles, Shamari, can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, and sort of like I've asked this question to sort of different people over the years, and depending on, you know, who they are and what they do, the answer may be different, right? Like some people who are into tech, you know, a few years ago, they would have said, hey, you need to look on Meetup, right? You need to find a Meetup group, you know, for people, you know, who do what you like, or even something that you're just interested in, and you need to go and connect with those people. You know, people who are, you know, older, maybe my parents' age, would say, oh, you need to look in the church, and you'll be able to connect with somebody there. Other people may say, you know, you need to expand your professional network. So what do you think on that?
I think they're all right, because if your potential sponsor is, or your type of potential sponsor is going to be a church, you should probably, if that's something you would normally do, you should probably be more chatty at church and more active and involved. But it doesn't do you any good if your sponsor doesn't go to church and is more likely to be found, you know, not to be so extremely polar opposite, but like at a bar, or, you know, at Burning Man or something like that, right? Then you should go there. If the sponsor you need is more of a corporate type, then you need to be networking more either within your organization or within industry. So I think the key for me, Shamari, the way I would answer your question is it's not finding the vehicle, it's identifying the sponsor and then figuring out which vehicle is right for that particular sponsor or type of sponsor, right? Because maybe you don't have a specific person in mind.
Mm. Okay.
Here's the key though. If you don't know what you're looking for, how do you know where to find it? Right now you're going to church, you're going to Burning Man, you're going here, there, you're in airport lounges, you're in Las Vegas, you're at the park with your dog. It's like now you're just playing, lottery at this point, right? Versus this type of person that would be a great sponsor and also either on the outside or inside has similarities to me, they tend to congregate or spend a lot of time or be involved in this. So that's why a lot of sponsorship happens, and you've probably experienced this, maybe David, you have as well, happens outside the actual organization where you're working. It could be a nonprofit you both serve at. It could be church activities. It could be a neighborhood thing, right? Maybe there's like a neighborhood, I don't know, like clean up the neighborhood kind of thing that you all do on the weekends together. And that could be the source of your next sort of biggest sponsor. So for me, I think the key is to be sort of flexible and open on the vehicle and be very targeted and think deeply about the who.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. David, any questions from you on what we've talked about today?
So, what is the best way to have a conversation for, or I should say with, a potential sponsor? And I guess I'm trying to ask about the financial part of sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get to that point or that request to ask about, or do you, or is it assumed that sponsorship means that that person is going to support some of your ideals financially to help you get to the next level of what you're trying to do?
I love that question, David, right? Because now the rubber is hitting the road, right? When money is being, when financial support is being extended, it's much more than, hey, let me introduce you to this person, or come with me to my, I don't know, vacation house or my clubhouse or whatever, right? Now, like, they're actually extending some investment or money, or at least getting you towards that direction. That's a bigger thing. And I would say my perspective on that, it has a lot to do with when you noticed Shamari sort of lighting up when he was talking about cars before, right? It's that people invest in the person. It's not just the idea, right? And this is where executive presence comes into play. If I'm going to put money on the line or reputation on the line for you, the number one thing is, even more so that I like you, because that just starts the conversation or the thought that I might do it. But the thing that actually seals the deal, especially at the higher levels and for the bigger risk, is, do I believe that you will be able to get the thing done that you're trying to get done, that you're asking me to sponsor you for? If I don't believe that, my support of you will be very limited, no matter how much I like you. Because I'm not about losing money, throwing money away, or embarrassing myself just because we drive the same car, right? But if we drive the same car, we have a great conversation, and I'm like, I have a good feeling about this person. They've really done their research. They seem to understand this. They've done a couple iterations. I'm willing to take a little bit more of a risk to support them. That's what makes the difference. Do they believe in you for what you're trying to get them to sponsor you for? That is sort of next level sponsorship. Does that make sense or answer your question, David?
It does. But then my other question is, how, it's almost like a how.
Mm-hmm.
How do they know what to give financially to? Or do they just say, because of the relationship that they have formed, that I'm just going to give you X dollars and you go run with it? Or do you, as the person looking for sponsorship, say, I have this idea and I need financial support for this thing in particular?
Yeah.
It almost seems like to me that if you're the person that's looking for sponsorship, that you don't ask for the financial part of it. You be yourself, and you let your passion show, and that person that decides that they're going to sponsor you, they give accordingly. But I'm not sure how that whole part works.
Shamari, would love to hear your perspective on this piece.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I'm not sure that I have a good answer for it. Other than to say that a lot of the effort should be put into to building the relationship, and I think that'll sort of make the difficult parts of that easier to answer.
Yeah, I mean, what I agree with Shamari. I mean, the only thing I would add is, like many other things in life, it really depends on the particular permutation you have here, right? So if you're in a situation, David, where you know exactly what you need, you're very specific about it, then you can get a little bit more specific about the ask, right? Whereas if you don't know, maybe part of the sponsorship goes into mentoring, where you start to ask people, well, what should I even be asking for before you ask for it? I don't believe you're a passive participant and you just wait around to see what people tell you you should get, right? You should be much more active in figuring that out. And then once you do have it figured out, like Shamari said, building that relationship. And then when it's appropriate and when it feels right, then you can make the ask. And it's an art. It's not a science, right? It's not like, okay, after 3, golf sessions or, steaks, I'm going to hit you up for X amount of dollars. It doesn't work that way, if that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, as we wrap up, I have just one favor to ask you. If you haven't already, check out my new leadership course on LinkedIn. So I have it posted as my latest post. I had it auto posted while we were talking. And it's the Thrive Guide to High Potential Underrepresented Professionals, which is us. So check it out. There's a coupon there if you want to take it for free. If you'd like to support me, you can also use the other link. And I think it's like less than $20 at this point right now, the way it's listed. So would love your support that way as well. And just a quick screenshot, that's the course, and it's on Udemy, 2.5 hours, 33 lessons, video, and using a similar kind of slide technology as we've been using here. And also, just to let you know, I'm developing a second piece Right now, I'm developing 2 programs. One is based on that course, which is how do underrepresented professionals thrive in environments where you are not, your success is an anomaly. That's the way I like to say it. You know, that you being in charge or CEO or selected to be promoted is not the norm. So what are the strategies and skills you need to thrive in that sort of environment? Because it's different than if you come in and all upper management is like you and they're like, well, of course, this is the person who we're going to, have succession planning with. So that's part 1. Part 2, which I'm working on right now, is from the manager's perspective. In today's increasingly global economy, where we're hiring people from other countries, other states, wherever, everyone's working from home, how do you manage a more diverse team than you've ever had in the past, right? It's not just a whole bunch of people from within 30 miles of your office who you're managing, who are all going to be somewhat similar now, similar education, similar demographics. Now you've got so many cultures, backgrounds, economic differences, social differences. How do you make that work as a team? Right. So that's kind of like the second piece that I'm really excited to work on and share with everyone. And I'll let you know more about that when it's ready. So we went a little bit over. Apologies for that. We had the technical difficulties. But always, you guys know where to find me. Feel free to reach out. And if there's ever a group that you think may benefit from this sort of workshop or training, would love a connect so I can discuss with them and see if it's a good fit.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks, both of you, and have a great rest of the week.
All right, you too. This is great. I appreciate it. Appreciate your insight.
Bye, David. Bye, Shamari.
Bye.
All right, thanks. Goodbye.